Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pokemon Masterclass. I'm your host, PokéNav, and each episode I bring you experts from across the Pokemon card world to take your knowledge of the TCG to the next level. My guests today are collectors, investors, and hosts of one of the best Pokemon YouTube channels discussing the underlying market and economic influences impacting the TCG. Please, everyone, welcome the John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman of the Pokemon card world, Jake and Rafi from Pokenomics. How's it going, guys?
Good. I love that. Do I get to be Friedman or do I have to be Keynes?
I'm going to let you guys decide because unfortunately, neither of those gentlemen are very good looking. So I mean, no disrespect when I say that, only from the standpoint of your intelligence and your knowledge with the market. Trust me. But again, guys, it is so good to have you here. We were discussing before the podcast started. It's funny how the Pokemon world is so small and how all of us kind of, in one way or another, follow each other, keep tabs on each other. And I've been watching you guys since you started. Found your content really, really good. And again, it's just a full circle experience once again for me having you guys here. So again, thank you so much for being here and taking your time. So, as I said, you guys do a great job of breaking down market trends and factors impacting investment decisions. That's where a lot of people come to you. And I'm sure we'll be getting into, investment talk and all that good stuff. But the real reason that I wanted to have you both on today is that you are really the only channel I'm aware of discussing two concepts I find fascinating, really, and that is the historical impact of cards and sets and the psychology of the market and how these two things influence the larger Pokemon market. And I find it really interesting. And Jake, I've watched or been a part of some of your live chats as well. And every time that you bring up, the fact that you really enjoy the history of cards and the history of sets and the psychology of the market, I wait. I wait for the chance for you to really dive into that. And then sure enough, somebody jumps in and is like, what should I buy right now? What's undervalued right now? So I'm really interested to dive more into these two concepts here and really get a little bit more detail and provide the larger community, because I think both of these are very important when we look at the Pokemon card market kind of from a macro perspective. So I guess we'll go ahead and start. I should say first, for those out there that aren't maybe not familiar with you guys, would you mind just giving a little bit of background and just kind of tell us where you come from and what made you jump to YouTube to provide this knowledge?
Want to go first, Rafi?
I can give the very beginning, and then Jake, you can take it from there. I guess the very beginning is Jake and I met because I'm friends with his girlfriend, have been for a long time. We sort of hit it off, and only a while into our friendship did we realize that we were both secretly into Pokemon. We had this amazing conversation went on late into the night when we both realized it. And at some point down the line, Jake is sort of a more serious collector and investor than I am, but he was telling me about at the time the content was very limited. This is before COVID hit. The content that really delved into the financial aspects was super limited. He was telling me who else was out there, and we were like, this stuff is not good information, right? It is like not helpful to people. It's borderline market manipulation. Like someone out there really needs to be the voice of like honesty, right? Honesty about the limits of our knowledge, and just go to some things you were talking about, more about history, more about economics, more about psychology. And I was like, Jake, you have to be the one to do this. And so part of I think what my big motivation for this was just to help Jake get an audience and get a channel. And he's done the lion's share of the work, but I really think he deserves to have a really big voice because he's such a positive influence on the community. I think so helpful to people.
Definitely, definitely.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah. I mean, I remember us just kind of talking that it would be a fun project for us to do. We love talking about Pokemon. We love talking about finance in general, investing in general. We love psychology. We love philosophy. you know, all of these sorts of things. And I think in a lot of ways, our channel, we use Pokemon, but we're really talking about a lot of broader issues and market issues that affect any market. And we're passionate and love talking about the cards. And as you said, I'm very interested in history, learning about, delving deep into specific markets, you know, where prices came from, you know, how sustainable have they been over time, you know, looking at the data, and trying to, you know, theorize and speculate, you know, why, you know, what's happening, why might that be? And yet at the time, part of it for me was just like I had a bunch more time, honestly, because my hobbies of like playing basketball and like playing music and doing other sorts of things outside the house just disappeared. So I was like, now it's probably a really good time. And you know, we started to notice, you know, starting sort of really January of last year, an uptick, even a little bit before that in some of the early like gym heroes were actually some of the first sets to start to move, and then into Jungle Fossil Neo, and then finally first edition base when we're talking about vintage. And it was interesting to watch that happen, and people really weren't talking about it or speaking about it actually at that point. It was really later when people started talking about the movement. So we felt that it would be great to kind of help people try and understand that sort of stuff. We weren't expecting that, and we probably should have, that a lot of other people would feel the same as us and want to do that too, which I think's, you know, great. I'm not sure I would feel as much of a need to start the channel now, but I'm happy because there are a lot of people I think helping, and I think that's where it really came from, was a like wanting to be that helpful voice for the community to help steer that. But we really love it. Like I actually really enjoy doing it. I love the live chats in particular, and it's been a really fun way to communicate with more people. And I think we're all pretty, you know, fairly on the socially isolated side of things. So even just making a lot of friends in the community has been really great for me. And doing something with Rafi, you know, has been a lot of fun for both of us, I think.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I can attest to the fact, I think you guys have been a fantastic influence for the community. And you came at a very serendipitous time, in my opinion, because you started your channel and you started uploading videos. I would say right before the big fanaticism really happened. And so along the way, you've really been able to rein people in and let them set their expectations at you know, a comfortable level. You know, you guys never get you know, too far outside on any extreme. You really try to keep an equilibrium on your channel, and I truly appreciate that. And as you said, many of these things, especially what we're going to talk about today, people will look at that as maybe extraneous or erroneous to the hobby. But when you look at things from a macro perspective, I've said before, the Pokemon hobby and the Pokemon market does not exist in a vacuum. There is a lot of extraneous factors that go into what we're seeing now and what we may experience in the future. So again, big kudos to you guys for doing this and for really bringing another more financially sound and economically sound voice to the hobby. So now that I've given you guys enough praise,
yeah, thank you.
So let's go ahead. I think the first one that we'll go ahead and jump into here is history. So for others out there that are listening to this and they're thinking to themselves, well, what does the history of Pokemon really have to do with it? And how does that affect its long-term investment potential? What would you guys say? What is the importance of history of a particular card or a set? What does that history have on its long-term collectability or its investment potential?
Yeah, well, a few things come to mind. So first of all, I enjoy the history, and that has nothing to do with investing. You know, just as a appreciator and lover of the hobby, I love learning about the art, about the different artists, about where the cards came from. You know, niche, all the different sort of niche vintage, you know, sort of interesting Japanese cards, even pre-TCG stuff. That's just a passion and a love of mine, separate from the investing or finance. But it's definitely very important for investing. as well. I think that part of what is sort of happening now, and this is extremely understandable, is there's so many cards and there's so much to know and there's so much history that when you don't really know the, first of all, the price history of certain things, which is a very important part of history, is you can know the history of the release of where the card came from, what is going to make it historic or stand out, but then also knowing the price history and having a sense of when did it spike, how did it move, to try and predict or understand some of those price patterns. So all of that's important with history in terms of determining where a card might go. But what I was saying before was, this idea that I think that because I think our hobby is so much of the demand and so much of the money is from newer people, there's a big knowledge gap that's happening there, and an extremely understandable knowledge gap for no fault of anyone out there, particularly the people who are really trying to learn this stuff and understand that stuff. And that's where I think that there are opportunities for lesser known type cards that have really great, what I would call, fundamentals to them. Rarity, scarcity, really cool art, really cool historic release, all these sorts of things, very, very similar to maybe like a Delivery Pikachu, but everyone knows about Delivery Pikachu. So that's going to have a much bigger, maybe inflated or relatively, inflated price to some of these other promos that people may not know about. And so that type of stuff from an investor perspective is how I think you're going to do better than average sort of over time, because I do think that, of course, in the short term, anything can get hot and it can seem completely random, which card goes up in the short run. But I think in the long run, when we look at other hobbies, we do see patterns kind of built around those types of value assessments. What do you think, Rafi?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think the biggest thing to figure out in any form of investment is, to what extent does the past predict the future, if at all? And in sort of general, like personal finance investing, I'm sort of a big believer of the theory that usually past performance does not predict future performance at all when it comes to picking stocks or picking funds, right? That, like, there's that famous example, the Wall Street Journal, saying, like, basically a monkey throwing darts at a dartboard would pick stocks just as well as, a Wall Street analyst, because the market behaves randomly in the short term. But the question is, in the long term, does it do that, right? And so if you invest in the total market via a vehicle like the S&P 500, you can say, well, if we go back 150 years, and I've actually done this, like I created a model of the stock market over the last 150 years of the United States history, there's a clear trend to it. And that trend doesn't follow every day, every year, but over long periods of time, 10 years, 20 years, definitely 30 years, you can generally expect a 9 to 10% annualized return. Of course, I'm not an investment advisor. None of this is investment advice. This is just my observation. And so that's why if your goal is like to invest for retirement, you put something in an index fund, you can expect that growth in the long term and ignore the day-to-day volatility. So with something like Pokemon, what really struck me about Jake and his analysis and why it was so astute is he was not just looking at Pokemon cards. He was looking into the history of other collectibles, including sports cards, but even other collectibles like comic books and things like that, which I think is super, super important, because it's very possible that Pokemon cards have not been around long enough to have any kind of predictors of future behavior, right? Maybe even 25 years of history for the TCG is not enough to really know what's going to happen. Definitely not at the macro level for the hobby. But if you look at other hobbies that have gone through similar trends, you might be able to derive a pattern from that. And that's why I think Jake's general way of looking at this is so important, because he's zooming back far enough to get those predictors of future behavior.
Yeah, and the reality is that all of this is such a tremendous risk, because even those hobbies are not really old enough to feel very confident in terms of collectibles being stuff that, there are these certain elements of collectibles that I think make them valuable to people, that we talk about in terms of, age, historic quality. We have plenty of videos on our channel going through the different value assessments, what S. and Pratt says, what Scott says, just, older, rare, mint, or better as a short thing. There are other things too on that list. But yeah, it's very difficult to predict like where this is going to be in 5 to 10, 15, 20 years. And what has happened in the last year is an incredible anomaly in the world, in I think all collectibles, to be completely honest. You know, and stocks. I mean, we're seeing these really unique things happen with you know, GameStop right now. You know, there's all these very unique events, and for anyone to have any sort of confidence in understanding what that is going to lead to, I kind of reject this idea that this stuff is very predictable. But for me as a value investor, I do believe that in the long term, people are going to want to collect things that they enjoy, that they like. I mean, the reason you collect something is because an item is important to you, you know, means something to you. And so I think trying to take a step back, and it's where you can really merge that sort of collector investor approach to kind of get an advantage over people who are really just here, I think, in the short term to speculate on hype and momentum investing, which can be very, very profitable, of course, in the short term, depending on how well you do. And we see that in the stock market with you know, lots of people who are value investors who are shorting the market getting destroyed right now versus, you know, some of these investors who are going heavy into stocks like Tesla. And, you know, again, we're not financial advisors here. I think you actually are, right?
Well, former, but yeah,
you know, it creates these interesting times. But I think for me, I want to own most of my collection for a very long time. And I want to feel comfortable and confident that it's going to retain some value, but it's also about the game and about trying to predict and having fun with that, you know. But I think, and I'm sorry, as people know on my channel, I'm a bit of I have lots of thoughts and I kind of rant all over the place and move all over the place. Rafi sort of drags me back in. But yeah, to predict, I think it's where I worry for people is people who are really trying to find patterns in this market and think that this stuff very much makes sense and is predictable. That's where I don't agree. I don't see that. I think a lot of the stuff we're seeing on Modern right now is interesting and certainly makes sense and could set some new norms. And we're all going to learn a lot from it, but trying to predict, you know, movement on these types of things feels very, very challenging. But
yeah. Well, and you're absolutely right. And a couple things that I want to highlight there is, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this saying, but in the financial world, we say it's not about timing the market, it's time in the market. And basically, you know, the longer that you can sustain yourself in the market, you can have a diversified approach to your portfolio, to your investments, the better off you're generally going to be. And, you know, much like what we're seeing in the stock market right now, like you said, people shorting, we're seeing a similar thing with Pokemon. And it's also a scary time to want to predict where things are going to be, because as you said, we are in a time right now that we have no, again, historical precedence for. And so the gains and the tremendous surge that we've seen in Pokemon this year, many people are trying to use this as their barometer to predict things, you know, 5-10 years down the road. So it is quite an uncertain time. And, you know, as I said, we're seeing that in the stock market as well. You know, I've been looking at, you know, you brought up the S&P 500. When you look at it from a market cap perspective, there's about 6 companies that make up the lion's share of that market cap. You know, the Google, we call them the Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple. And when they're making up the lion's share of the market cap, well, they've done really well during the pandemic because of the nature of their business. But, you know, what about the other 494 companies? You know, so that in a way is sort of analogous to what I see in the Pokemon market as well. And again, it's good to look back on history, because we do the same thing in the financial markets. We look back on historical precedents that have far-reaching effects on your current economy. So with that, I guess my next question for you guys would be, you know, give me an example of, you know, maybe a set or a card that has a historically significant event that we've seen the long-term value of that.
I think a really good example is like the original Tropical Wind card for people who, do you know that card,
Mm-hmm.
PokéNav?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think because that card is not a holo, you know, which is generally going to be one strike against it. There are about 180 of that card in the world, which is actually not that few when we compare it to other trophies, you know, other even more modern trophies. I mean, even if we compare it to the like Art Academy 2015 cards where there are 100 of each, you know, those cards are selling and have been selling for, you know, they were selling for a long time for about, and this is about history, right? Everyone should know the numbers. And if you're buying these cards, you should have them. You know, those cards were selling for about $750 in PSA 9. Then they jumped up to about 1,000, 1,500. Who knows what they're going for right now? The Art Academy cards. At the same time, the Tropical Wind card was selling for about 10,000 in a PSA 9. You know, now in a PSA 9, I think, you know, one sold, I think, for 55 a little bit ago. Trophies have actually been going up still, while other cards have been going down. Not modern, other vintage retrace a little bit. Modern's very, very fascinating. I love seeing what's happening in modern. It's so interesting. Yeah. But so I think that's an example of, because it was from that first amazing historic Tropical Mega Battle tournament, and because it's the first of that line of those amazing Worlds promo cards, that really stood out to me as a card that I wanted to own. And I think a lot of other people feel the same way and felt the same way, which is why it garnered that price. Unlike, you know, like there was that 1/1 card, right? These 1/1 cards with a guy's face on the trophy. It's like, you know, really interesting, really cool story. So there is some interesting history there, but maybe not as good looking, or you don't want a guy's face on your card, you know? So it's where sort of the good lookingness of the card, the story that goes along with Psyduck being on that card and then being in all of the other Worlds promo cards, that I think gives some value to that card where there wouldn't be. Another really good example is the University Magikarp, you know, Unicarp, which I'm not a huge fan of, but the reason that card has value is because of its release and how it was released. Because they're probably, you know, the intended distribution was $1,000, was 1,000 of those cards versus the 180 versus the 100. People go back and forth on how many there actually are. People think that there might be quite a bit less, and that was just the intended distribution. So when you're dealing with trophies, there's always that sort of thing. But that card has a reprint that anyone can get, where there are reprint in the sense of they had that art basically reprinted on another card that was very common and easy to get. So it's really the history of that release that I think makes that interesting. If it was kind of a meh release, people might not want it. So we'll see. You know, the market is so young, and there's such a knowledge gap right now. You know, so few people probably watching, you know, and maybe probably more so on channels like yours or mine, but less so on people who are just typing into YouTube for the first time, what Pokemon cards should I buy? Of course,
Yeah.
buy modern, which is a huge part of the market, very understandably right now. In 20 years, that's going to disappear. That knowledge gap is going to disappear. And people who stay in the hobby, even in 5 years, a lot of that knowledge gap will disappear. You know, people who've been in the hobby 15 years, even 3, 4, 5 years have such an advantage right now over people who are brand new. In 3, 4, 5 years, that'll disappear, even in 1 to 2 years for certain people. And that's when I think you're going to see cards that have really interesting releases where people actually know the numbers and there's reason for the value. It's not just that's what people are buying or that's what someone told me to buy. It's I'm buying this because I see the value. I understand it for myself. That builds in a confidence that wouldn't be there. You know, if prices start going down on something like that, I'm like, well, I see the value here. I'm not worried. Whereas if you own a card where you're like, I don't know why this is valuable, it's just very valuable, and the prices start going down, you're going to see potentially more people panicking or, oh, I didn't actually like this card that much. I was just buying it because other people were buying it, or, you know, it's part of that collect what you love, you know, type of thing can go in there. So,
and I think that Jake's point gets at something that we talk a lot about, which is kind of the advantage that being a collector gives you as an investor. Like, if you do this as a thought experiment, right? Imagine someone's brand new to Pokemon and they're trying to make bets on cards. They might think, okay, well, like, what are the most popular Pokemon of all time? They'll look up one of those surveys that the Pokemon company did, and what are the top 25 most popular Pokemon, and use that as maybe a guiding point. Versus if you played Pokemon as a kid, if you've been in and out of the hobby for 30 years or, you know, 20, 25 years like we have, right? that stuff, it's like innate for us, right? And it's not going to be the same as whatever the survey said, but it's like we have our own personal affinity to different Pokemon characters and different specific cards that just like, because we are literally the target market, we're the ones who are buying it for fun, either to play the game or to collect the cards. And so it gives you a huge advantage when it's like, you understand the psychology of buyers because you are a buyer, right? Not just a flipper, not even just a long-term investor. And so that gets to, I think, Jake's, point that he talks a lot about like intrinsic value. It's hard to know what the true intrinsic value of something is, right? Because everyone has a different perception of it. But chances are, if there's a Pokemon that I really, really like, a lot of people like it too. If there's a piece of art on a card that I think is really cool, a lot of other people think it too, because I'm not new to this, right? Because I've been, enjoying these characters since I was 10 years old or whatever.
And there can be a logic behind it, right? Like if you really like a Pokemon because you played it in the Game Boy game, but you don't think other people probably played it, that isn't a good reason why other people are going to like it. But if you like it and that reason seems like it's going to be similar for a lot of people, doing that self-analysis of why you're drawn to a certain card, that's how you can really do very well, I think, over time. And where Pokemon goes overall, nobody knows. People say it's going to quadruple again. People saying it's going to crash and be worth nothing. No one really knows. But overall, I think within the Pokemon market, having that knowledge and that logic and that rationality behind your purchases, those items are going to stand up a lot better than the items that don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys highlight the importance, I think, of the collectors and the collector mindset. Because if you go back 20 years ago, did we really think that things like swirls on WotC Hollows or misprints, that those would garner a premium nowadays? Probably not. But they were interesting to collectors. Collectors like to, find those particular cards because there were one-offs. And I think that's also an example of just trying to find, I guess you could call them the diamonds in the rough. And then the other thing is, and I've said it on my channel, along with, what like SM Pratt says, scarcer, rare, minter. I also like to look for commemorative type of products that are released with maybe around certain milestones or to celebrate certain events. A recent one could be the, I'll probably botch the name, but the Kanazawa Pokemon Center box. We've seen a pretty good increase in value in that. And I think it probably lends to, that sentiment. Do you guys think, because I personally, so when I first started, I was kind of giving a similar sentiment around evolutions. Now, I think there's multiple factors working towards the increase in price that we've seen in evolutions. Again, I think one is just time in the market. It's about 5 years old now. But do you think that because evolutions was really released around what I've called the Renaissance period for Pokemon, do you think that this is maybe an underlying factor that we're starting to see play out for this particular set?
Yeah, Evolutions is fascinating. So Evolutions has been, a set that Rafi and I talk a lot about, and I think it's such an interesting. There's so many facets of Evolutions that make it not investable and then make it very investable. And I think that's why it's such an interesting set to watch, kind of what wins out in terms of what you're talking about, the reasons why it is so investable or was so undervalued potentially. And I will say that we're gonna, like, I want to see what it's going to be at in 5, 10, 20 years and how it does, because hype and people speculating doesn't mean that it's that people are really buying that product, holding and opening it. We can go into that, but the negatives of Evolutions, of course, is supply. That's the main one. But I do think, and I think where you first of all, and I don't know, PokéNav, and you can tell me, but I think that Evolutions has gone up so much because of a few factors. One, it's of course just the amount of demand new money, new people. You know, I analyzed about how many boxes were being sold, and it was something like $50 million, like $25 to $50 million probably has been put into Evolution's booster boxes to get enough of the supply off of the market that it's gone to $1,000. So when stuff like that's a humongous amount of money. With that amount of money in Pokemon, you could do some amazing damage on the vintage side, right? And so this now, who is buying it? Is it individuals buying lots and lots of boxes to speculate, where they could put that into vintage instead, but they view that as a better long-term investment, or are they viewing it as a really good hype-driven vehicle that they're going to make short-term money on it before it collapses? You know, there's a lot of potential interesting things that I think are going on with that. When a lot of people buy something, there's an interesting psychology that goes around it no one wants it to go down. Like a lot of people have stake in it. And that can also create some artificial price, artificial hype, artificial enjoyment. You know, I think that your point when it was going for $120, that you think this box should be, you know, higher or be more valuable. You know, I would have disagreed with you at that point.
I think everybody did.
Yeah, but you know, so far you've been correct. If your assessment was that it was going to go up a lot this quickly, and then I'd be interested to hear sort of what your, because I think this idea that it took 4 to 5 years to sort of like bloom doesn't compute with my feeling on that set. I feel like nobody wanted it at all, and then which was the reality for sure.
Yeah, I can jump in on that point, because I think that's where the history matters so much. Like that was right before Evolutions was when I got back into just very casual collecting and buying modern product. And Evolutions became a literal like meme in the community of people who were buying modern cards for fun or to play with. And it was like a terrible, terrible set, right? From a playability standpoint, almost none of the cards were usable in like tournament grade decks. And from a collectability standpoint, the nostalgia was cool, but like didn't quite live up to its potential. It was kind of the consensus. And so you could see Evolutions. Like the Pokemon company was trying like crazy to dump the product, right? Potentially because demand didn't meet expectations, potentially because they just printed so much that we don't know what the answer is there. But like everywhere you went, like all these like repacked products with 3 packs that you can get at whatever stores, like those always had Evolutions. BJ's, the big box retailer, which I talk about because we shop there, one time had a thing where they literally just stuffed 8 extra Evolutions packs into one of those like EX boxes. They literally just stuffed them in there. Like nobody wanted them. And this was as recently as like 6 months ago. Not even kidding, right? 6 months ago, you buy a thing that had like 12 Evolutions packs for $25 at BJ's. And so my, like, part of it is, for me, it's hard to forget that, right? If I want to be like a truly astute, rational investor, I have a hard time even believing there's intrinsic value in Evolutions, just because I have that memory of a time where people, like, it was like icky, like literally nobody wanted it. Nobody could care less. Every time you bought like a collection box and it had an Evolutions pack in it, you were bummed. So it's crazy to see how much things have turned around, but this might be a case where either the history serves you well as an investor or it doesn't, because it's biasing you.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly, right, the argument would be, and this happens a lot, is that, you know, old guard says something isn't valuable, and so people listen to it when actually they do like it, but it's just too cheap for them to like it. And then when the prices started going up on Evolutions, they actually did like it the whole time, but the prices going up actually made them realize they liked it, which is what happens often, you know, because when something's very cheap, people think it's bad, but if something goes up in price, people take another look. I think that, and clearly the huge amount of new people in the hobby, if we think that the reason Evolutions did really well in 2016 was people were rediscovering their childhood initially, and a number of people really liked it. And so if we think a huge amount came in now, again, having the same experience with Evolutions, and all of that is supernatural, not artificially hyped at all, like, and it was enough. That's the part that I was surprised about, because I believed that would happen, PokéNav, but I just didn't think it would be nearly enough to wipe out the supply. That was the part that really shocked me, because I knew people had like thousands of these booster boxes they couldn't dump, like they like literally no one could get rid of. And the quickness, right? It was like a week or 2 weeks. It went from 100 to 400. It wasn't like oh, this set is slowly aging and becoming interesting and valuable. It was like suddenly, and like people started making videos, lots of videos on YouTube saying Evolutions is like the best thing to buy. You know, to your credit, you said it before. Most people who were making those videos, and you gave reasons for why, you know, most people who were making those videos were kind of following the hype train and were like, frankly, brand new to Pokemon themselves and making tier lists and just putting it at the top. And people love tier lists, and people new into the hobby, they search for a tier list. It tells them what to buy. And then that confirmation, it's like, oh, it's base set. I feel comfortable with that. This person tells me it's a good investment. Okay, great. I feel comfortable with that. Like all of that stuff, I think went into that product. But, you know, I'll tell you, like there's way crazier things going on right now in some modern, like some of these PSA cards. And what I would say is like the Evolutions booster box has a much, much better chance, in my view, of retaining value than any of the PSA cards inside that box. That's where I have a really hard time. And I own 10 PSA 10, like not PSA 10 English Charizards, the C, because that's impossible to get, as everyone knows, but the CP6 version, you know, which is obviously very closely related, you know, and so I certainly have invested stake in that. Now I bought those cards for $1, $3, $4, you know, because that's what they were being valued at. Now I can sell those things for like $1,000 each, you know, with that crazy returns in a year. This is 1 year. It's a 1,000% return on a card, you know, so that's crazy. Like that shouldn't make you feel like a genius. That should make you feel like people have no idea what they're doing, because that's to be completely honest with it, because that's now they don't know probably that I bought that for $1, because they're hearing people, you know, and again, it's this isn't Amazon. Like this isn't a great idea that was misunderstood and not correctly evaluated because people underestimated the technology, or, you know, these are Pokemon cards. Like, you know, so that's where I worry. I think when you see those sort of companies or those sorts of assets come out of nowhere, it's a lot more understandable. Although I do think that Evolutions was missed. I think Level X's, and I was a big proponent of Level X's for the exact same reason of the old guard is sort of too negative. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Pokénav. I'm sorry, I'm talking so much. You know, that negative, you know, there was like that irrational sort of negativity, but the fundamentals were really good. I think for me, what I loved about the Level X's though was the how little there were of those compared to anything in the Sun and Moon era and anything later. And yet the Sun and Moon stuff was already selling for more than the Level X's when I was buying the Level X's, which made absolutely no sense. Whereas Evolutions is actually the most printed set probably of all time, even more than any ultra modern set. So what do you think of all that, PokéNav? And
well, boy, you guys have given me a lot to parse out there. But yeah,
sorry,
the first thing, the first thing that I have to say is I think you're absolutely right with, you know, in economic terms, they call it conspicuous consumption. And this is something that I want to get into when we kind of get more into the psychological nature of this. But when people start to see that, you know, going up rapidly, especially, which it was sitting at $100 for years and years, and they saw that rapid increase. And so I think a lot of people jumped onto that bandwagon, which I don't advocate that in the slightest, because that to me does not create you know, a good foundation for, or a long-term foundation for any type of investment. I personally would not advocate that at all. But going back to, you know, as far as the characteristics of Evolutions, I think that, you know, in others that I've talked to, other collectors and investors, once we reach about that 4 to 5 year time horizon for mini sets, that's when you start seeing that increase in value. Usually that's about enough time for it to get outside of that reprint window, which is something that we run the risk of a lot with modern and ultra modern. We've seen that, you know, and some sets aren't nearly as affected. Hidden Fates hasn't seemed to be nearly as affected as others. But I knew once we were starting to get to that time horizon, we were getting out of that time frame. And like you said, I think Pokemon did. They knew that they weren't going to be printing, and I think this lends to the Pokemon's thinking that they didn't want to print it anymore, is that they were dumping a lot of product. And I think especially in the time that it occurred, where we have a pandemic, we have less manpower, we have less printing power, Pokemon said, why are we continuing to print this set that is, 4 years old? Let's focus our resources on our new products. So that I was kind of forecasting, and that I was kind of speculating on. And then probably the biggest thing would be, I hate to give it this term, but I've kind of developed it for it. It's the poor man's base set. So as you said, as many people come back into the hobby and they see the prices of first edition base set, unlimited base set, even Japanese base set just skyrocket and get out of the price range of so many of them, I think it was more or less kind of a call to action of, I want to get that nostalgia. I want to get these cards that I knew as a kid. And I think that kind of gobbled up a good portion of that supply. It was just, I think, more or less just serendipitous in the fact that there were so many people coming back into the hobby. And obviously a lot of that is due to the influence of people like Logan Paul. You have Steve Aoki, a lot of people bringing attention to it. And, people look out on the open market and they say, well, I'm not spending $20,000 for an unlimited booster box. Hey, there's a reprint here and it's sitting, even at $500. Hey, I'll pick that up. Hey, there's a Charizard in there. I'm going to pick that up. So I think that's kind of where a lot of it comes from, and that's where my thinking was surrounding it. But again, much like you guys, I was really rationalizing it around that historical precedents that had been set, kind of that renaissance, that time that so many people were coming back into the hobby. Not nearly as much as now, but definitely a time that I think a lot of people look back on fondly. So
now, if it's okay, I'll
take.
Yeah, thank you. I'll jump in because I have to run early, and I'll let you guys continue. But 2 points I just wanted to leave with. One is on that point. I think there's an interesting theory that says basically cheaper products actually should have a value premium placed on them because they're cheaper, right? So people come into the hobby and they basically have a spending limit. And if they stay in the hobby, that spending limit goes up and up and up. We all know that sort of feeling, right? If at the beginning, it seemed crazy to me to spend more than like $10 on an individual card, maybe 20, right? It was like my maximum that I would spend on any card, no matter how meaningful it was. Jake helped me increase that limit by virtue of his bullishness, but that increases over time. But when you come into the hobby, you're like, this card is currently going for less. That might make that card more valuable because it means the newcomers are going to gravitate to it because they're priced out of everything else. So I think that's sort of an interesting factor to consider. The second thing, and this is more of a theory that I'll just leave you with as a potential theory, is that we might be in a phenomenon where there's basically, I don't know the technical term for this, but there's more capital to be allocated, more investment money that people want to invest than there are investable vehicles to put it in. And I think we're seeing this as well in the macro economy. So I'll give one example that I was actually talking with someone about today. If you're familiar at all with SPACs, I think it stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Vehicle, basically a new sort of trend in finance, a new way to IPO a company. But essentially what you do is you invest money in a fund manager who's then going to take a company public, and you're going to have first access to that. What's crazy is that these fund managers have not yet picked out the company that they're going to take public and put your money in. So you're basically betting on the manager. You think this is a good, smart person, they're going to find a good company and make it work. The stat that I last saw, and this might be out of date, it may not be correct, is that there were 250 SPACs out there, like reputable fund managers, whatever, that did not yet have targets or even a proposed target in sight. So what you're seeing is just this massive amount of capital. People have nowhere else to put it. You could argue it's because interest rates have been kept at $0 for so long. You could argue it's because of stimulus and printing money due to the pandemic, whatever the reason is. Too much capital, not enough places to allocate it. People are literally handing over blank checks to fund managers. They have no idea where the money's going to go. The fund manager has no idea where it's going to go. Probably is going to go nowhere. That's my prediction, but don't quote me on it. And maybe the same thing is happening in Pokemon, right? Maybe it's from a collecting standpoint, people are bored at home, stimulus checks, et cetera, the usual. But also maybe people legitimately want to put some of their money into something that's more risky, right? You see this with the GameStop stocks, right? People want to have fun, but also they do want to put money in some more volatile, more risky, but that has more potential upside. And in Pokemon, especially modern, they might be running out of options of things that have good fundamentals, like Jake says. And so when they're all the things that have good fundamentals have been priced out of your price range, what you turn to next is what the hype train, essentially. So that's just a theory. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's applicable to Pokemon. And I'm sorry I have to run and leave early because it's been great, but I'll let you guys discuss it and take it from here. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate it, Rafi. Thank you so much for being here, man.
There's this weird sort of movement right now, PokéNav. It's very interesting where they're sort of like, and this is why I think there are some holes in your argument, if you don't mind me kind of pushing back a little bit.
Go ahead.
There's an interesting movement right now saying that vintage isn't very popular and most people like modern, right? But why Evolutions if Evolutions is a reprint of vintage? So there's a little bit of a hole there that you didn't make that argument, but that I hear from a lot of people. And I think it's more that it makes me feel more that there are a lot of people in this space who really want to make money, and they want the items that they bought to go up, and they're kind of willing to say whatever it takes in any sort of public forum to, you know, in a sort of YouTube comment section, you know, saying, trying to put kind of influence and push, you know, like when I talk positively about something, that video gets mostly likes and it gets a bunch of comments saying, yeah, like that's really great, you know? And I'm like thinking to myself, oh, they probably own it and they just are glad that I talked about it and hoping it's going to move on. So I think that I do very much agree though with Rafi's point. And this was a video that I made a while ago, and why I put so much money into Level X is, you know, I owned about 10% of the Level X cards, you know, of the pops in each of those things. And I was buying like 10 PSA 10 first edition holo of all the vintage, you know, as many vintage cards as I could, because instead of base set, because base set was too expensive. And my theory was that the less expensive stuff was going to be more attainable for the newer people that were going to come into the hobby, and that they were going to feel more comfortable spending those lower amounts. And that the actual, unlike most hobbies where their original set, or not most hobbies, but something like Magic the Gathering, where alpha has the least printed. In fact, base set doesn't, right? Base set actually has the most printed in Unlimited, has quite a bit printed in base set first edition, although probably less than certain sets, but probably not as little as like something like Neo, which is why I was going heavy after that. And I think that, you know, I saw all of that. I saw that people were saying that stuff wasn't very good, wasn't very investable. It was irrational. There weren't really good reasons. There weren't compelling reasons to me to think that. But sort of applying that same logic to this, I mean, I agree with you. Basically, I don't agree with the 4 to 5 idea that sets go up 4 to 5 years after. I think it's if we look back, it's a lot more random and just kind of chaotic. And I don't think that's what happened with Evolutions here, is that it was just like 4 to 5 years old. And we can go back and forth on that and discuss it. It's interesting, and I don't know. You know, I'm interested to where you have that idea from. But I do think the rest of your fundamentals were really good on Evolutions outside of the supply. And for me, at the end of the day, it was a supply thing. It was a supply and personal bias, I think, on my side, to be fair, and where I got it wrong, that they just felt like such proxy cards, whereas other people seem to not have that response to them, which surprises me. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when we look at like, you know, the financial markets, you know, a 4 to 5 year time horizon, you know, anything over 5 years, we consider a long-term investment. So really, I'm looking at something similar when I'm looking at Pokemon cards, and really the barometer that I'm using there is that reprint timeframe. Now, it's not guaranteed. I mean, Pokemon could reprint any of these cards anytime that they want to. But just kind of, again, going back through, and again, we're in a time now where it is different. You go prior to 2016, reprints weren't exactly a common thing. Even a year, 2 years after a set's release, you didn't really see the same level of reprints. So, you know, maybe going back that far in history, maybe we have to set a new historical precedent for that. And I've, to be honest with you, I did not think that Evolutions would increase
Yeah.
at the rate that it has. I don't think
I would
anybody
hope.
did.
I would hope.
Yeah.
That. I would worry about you if you thought that, to be like that would be like where's he coming up with that from?
Well, and I feel like a lot of people think that I'm sitting on just this massive cachet of evolutions. Like I've got 2 cases of evolutions booster boxes. That's it. That's it, guys.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that I have like a inherent disposition towards, or I've got some kind of huge stake in it. It's just looking, as you said, looking at these various factors, and there are some, like you said, there are outliers with evolutions that don't indicate that it's actually a long term, or it has long term value. But you just try to weigh all of the pros, all of the cons, and then as you said, you make a decision accordingly, similar to what you've done with the level X cards. You can look back things like prime cards, looking at all of these different factors. And we really are in the infancy of Pokemon and the Pokemon market. I mean, the hobby itself is 25 years old, but realistically, the investing aspect of that, maybe 10 years, that we're really starting to establish data points, analytics, really things that we can create a firm financial foundation for.
Yeah.
So, and I've said it before, I think that it's going to take, as you said, perhaps another 5 to 10 years for all of this information to come together, and for the hobby as a whole to become educated enough to where we do feel more comfortable in making solid recommendations on products. Because at this point, it's kind of the Wild West, really. And as a former financial advisor, when we are going through portfolio construction, Pokemon is really in the classification of alternative investments. We just call them alternatives. And typically when we're looking at a particular portfolio, alternatives usually don't compose more than about 10% of your overall portfolio. And I've heard you discuss in a previous podcast that you were on, where there's situations I think that people find themselves in, and I think this is going to play into the psychology as well, where they're coming into this and they're trying to invest, or maybe they're trying to create a business, and there's really 2 different ways that people are approaching it. They're creating a business and they're running that business on margin, meaning they're having to move product in order to garner more product to sell. For somebody like yourself, like myself, we have our investment classes spread out. So I have income from my work, obviously. I have real estate. I have dividends from my other financial assets. So I don't feel, beholden to any one thing within Pokemon. Whereas there's a lot of people who came into this. I mean, something's got to give. And I know I'm kind of rambling here, but something's got to give when you
It's about
look
time
at...
you rambled a little bit instead of because I've been rambling the whole time.
And I can do that as well. So this may turn into a really long podcast. But, when you look at statistically, how many people live paycheck to paycheck? I mean, at the height of the pandemic, or I should say even before the pandemic, the recent statistics, 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. Well, when you have such a massive influx of people coming into the hobby and you see all of this money being thrown around from all different angles, something's got to give. And I mean, we don't have firm data. Most of it is anecdotal, but I have heard many cases of people who have purchased these products on credit, taken out loans. And that is something that I hate to see, because again, we're trying to establish the foundation for the hobby and its long-term viability. And when you see those things going on in the market, it gives you a lot of trepidation. And I think you're right that there are many products, many sets that we're seeing that have seen exorbitant growth. But much of that is due to inexperience and just not having knowledge in the hobby. And I
Yeah.
think that's where it's great that these discussions come about, because, through these, not only am I able to broadcast you and Rafi to thousands of people, maybe millions of people, but at the same time, I get educated as well. We go back and forth. We correspond with each other, and in doing so, we're able to provide, better, not advice, but more sound recommendations. And ultimately, the more of that you have, the more of that discussion that you have going on, I think the better chances we have of this hobby surviving.
I think one big problem, I try to put myself into the headspace of a person brand new to understand why they're purchasing certain items that they're purchasing, because I think there's a danger, right, of being like, people are bad investors that are putting their money into this. It's probably better to start with, they're actually probably pretty smart investors. So what are they seeing here that I'm not seeing, and or what are they not seeing that I know about? And I think that is making me see that card in a different way, and why they like it and why I don't, for example. So, I saw like a PSA, I'm going to pick on one card right now. I saw a PSA 10 regular hollow from, which set was it? A Mew from Fates Collide, PSA 10, sell for $360 in PSA 10, just the regular hollow from a 2016 set that isn't a base set reprint, this is where I'm getting at. I don't think it's about base set even a lot. I think people just want to put money and make money, because we're seeing, it's a cool looking Mew hollow. But that was a very easy card to pull. I opened a few boxes of that. I have a number of those cards just from opening up a few boxes of it. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of those in gem mint condition sitting across the world in people's binders right now. But people don't know that necessarily coming into the hobby. They see a cool Mew card. So trying to get into the headspace of that person, they see a cool Mew card from a 2016 set that's blowing up, that the price of the box is blowing up right now, because XY is not just evolutions. A lot of XY has really blown up in price, that whole era. So they think two smart things here. One, Mew, popular Pokemon. So they're actually being smart. Two, XY's moving up a lot, smart. Three, pop report's super low. This must be a rare, excellent card to buy. In reality, the pop report is super low because it was worth nothing and everyone had a million of them, so no one cared enough to grade it. So that's happening a lot. So there's a lot of these cards that seem very rare in modern. Like when you see a PSA 60, a PSA 80, PSA 10, with 80 in the pop of a vintage hollow, particularly if it's from a set where you rarely see boxes, like base set first edition, or some of the Neo sets, or the E series, or the Nintendo EX era. When you see that pop report is likely to maybe only double in the next 10 to 20 years. If that card stays at $360, which it will not, initially at least, unless everyone starts to love that card, right? I mean, demand can spike anything right now, because if $50 million can be spent on evolutions, technically that money could go anywhere. There's so much money and interest in Pokemon. But if we compare, right, someone bought that card for $360. There were PSA 10 Neo first edition hollows that went for $360.
Right.
And it's like, you would have to evaluate that card at you'd have to like that card thousands of times more, right, to make any sort of financial equation there that would make sense. And I think that's where people say, well, I like modern and I don't like vintage and these sorts of things, but I love evolutions, but I love, there's a lot of arguments that I think don't make sense.
There's a lot of subjectivity, really is kind of what you're getting at here. So there is a lot of subjectivity here that I think is permeating, and and that's fine. I mean, to be quite honest, a lot of this is subjective. I mean, granted, you have, again, scarcity, you have pop reports if you can rely on them, and you have these factors that do lend to a card being more valuable than another. But I think especially, when it comes to modern, there is a lot of subjectivity there. And I think that is what is, to be honest, in the end, I think that it is WotC, or I should say vintage, that is propping up the modern market. So it is because of the popularity of WotC that modern is even seeing a lot of the value that it has.
But yet people are arguing the opposite, right? People are arguing that I don't like vintage, and the reason I'm paying more money for a card that's brand new and not rare than I would for this very rare vintage card is because I like the modern better, even though I got engaged with Pokemon as a kid, and that's why I love. Like, for me, I think what's strange about it all is, like, I like all the Pokemon and I like all the Pokemon cards across the generations. And I just imagine most people who really care about this and it connects to their childhood, weren't just Charizard lovers. Right. When I see these huge disparities, even in Charizard prices versus the rest, again, not how I would evaluate these things as a collector. That's the stuff that gets my mind moving about how much of this market is going off of hype, of going off of price memory. Do these things make sense? $360,000 for a PSA 10 first edition Charizard versus $300 for a PSA 10 first edition Neo Hollow, which is a first of appearance of another Pokemon where there are only 60 of those versus 120. You could buy out that whole market 10,000 times over, every one of those cards. Or buy the one Charizard. So it's interesting. Now, again, yes, definitely tons of subjectivity, in all of this stuff. But when we go back to what we were talking about in the beginning, value investing is the idea that over time, the logic and the fundamentals, as long as you're right and have good logic and fundamentals and you identify the important things, those things are likely going to win out, because at the end of the day, this is all supply and demand. And the supply and rarity of these things isn't gonna change. That cannot be manipulated. Now it can be manipulated in terms of scarcity, right? Because that's happening a lot right now. Like, Evolutions is not rare at all, and yet the boxes are becoming more scarce all of a sudden. Even though all those boxes are sitting sealed in people's houses, everywhere. So it's not a rare item, but it's a scarce item. So and that creates a fear of missing out, when in reality, there's millions of people who probably want to sell their Evolutions at a certain time, So it's at the end of the day, it's, if nobody likes vintage, which I wouldn't understand how you can like Pokemon and not like where it comes from. I just don't get it. It's straight. But there are people who, they swear to me that's the truth. Then I completely get it. Why would you ever invest in anything, even if it's rare, if you don't like it? They're a million one-of-one things. You can buy these like tobacco cards from, over 120 years ago for, some of them for $10. But if there's no demand, just because they're old, vintage, these sorts of things, then there's no demand. But if we look at comic books as a guide here, the vintage stuff, the old stuff, the rare stuff, the stuff that has rarity, not because of like manufactured rarity, like modern sports or even like modern Pokemon chase cards, but have that rarity because these cards were beat up. They were initially mass produced, so they were able to garner mass popularity, which is very, very key for mass, and is the plus with sets over trophies, that it was able to be mass produced and garner that sort of immense connection to people, but then also for that item to then be rare. And this is why why I made $1 million in Pokemon. Like, that was my theory, was that those two things are the key to any collectible market. It's that it needs to be mass produced enough that it's meaningful and touches so many people's lives, but then becomes scarce enough that it creates that huge, hyped up situation where people are willing to spend more and more and more. But that's not what's going on in modern. Modern is very interesting. I think the vintage growth, although it certainly was speculative, and I think bubbles were formed, particularly, it's part of why I sold my unlimited cards, some of my first edition common uncommons, because I knew how much population was out there. But overall, that growth to me made perfect sense with the amount of new demand that came in, you know, and felt like it was collector driven. People were jumping over each other to buy the cards because they like rediscovered their childhood. And I was talking to a lot of people. Now, there were other people speculating, but it seemed more like that. A lot of these modern products, I don't get that sense. You know, you're having people buy 100 of a certain card because they're trying to push up the price, not because they want 100 of that card in their binder. And there's a lot of market manipulation going on, intentional manipulation. There's a lot of shill bidding, defensive shill bidding. But at the end of the day, what I will say, you know, end of rant here. What I will say at the end of the day, we could still be, and this is, you know, we can still be on the up tip. You know, things could get more crazy and prices could keep going up more. And, you know, and it wouldn't shock me if the Evolutions booster box went to $2,000 with the way that the market is right now. It wouldn't shock me if that box went back down to $150. Genuinely wouldn't shock me either way, because the amount of supplies out there is so crazy. I think the PSA cards and the cards from the set are going to have a really hard time retaining value. Booster box is a lot more interesting because there's also the experience that goes with opening the booster box that people pay a premium for. And these pack selling channels, man, they have changed the whole game of modern Pokemon. They sell, like, I know guys right now who are selling that for $1,500, you know, in Europe. They're doing these pack breaks and they tell their, you know, some of the guys aren't, you know, whatever, they tell their subscribers they're definitely going to make money on it. You know, this is an amazing set to invest in. Like, that's the type of stuff. They're not talking about the rarity, the scarcity, the fundamentals, you know. And to give you credit here, and why I like your channel, and I think there's a lot of value in a lot of your videos, is you give reasons why a product stands out to you. You know, you gave reasons why that Evolutions product stood out to you and you felt like it was going to go up. You know, you picked out like that first ever promo Charizard. You know, I've seen a few things that you picked out and you were like, this is kind of a unique product, or, you know, unique special thing that stands out to you. Maybe it'll stand out to other people. And I think that is at least a step forward, a big step forward. My concern is this supply and demand of all of those things, and the numbers just don't make sense to me. Like, if you can you can buy now, if the Wizards of the Coast, if you couldn't buy base set unlimited cards if you can buy a whole set easily for $1,000, right? You could buy like a decent condition unlimited base set for $1,000 right now. Okay. Or you could buy for $6,000, you could buy it in PSA 9. That isn't that much more than $1,000 Evolutions box. And there are people buying cases of Evolutions for like, I saw one person buy it for like $8,000, $9,000. Right. So when we think about that, it's like, what's really happening here? People are actually valuing Evolutions more than base set, or more than certain aspects of base set. Does that make sense to me as a collector? Or does that feel like it's hype driven, or just people don't realize how much supply there really is still out there? Not to even mention, right, the packs, which are endless and still going out in new products. And the fact that Evolutions really hasn't been out of print very long, even though it's a 4 or 5 year old set. It was being, you know, printed and distributed, and more were coming out for 4 to 5 years. So, but again, and I would never want to tell anyone to sell their Evolutions, because I think that box in this environment, it's like that box should go over $2,000. Wouldn't shock me. What I don't expect is the box steadily goes up now for 4 to 5 years all of a sudden, but it's possible. You know, we might reach a point, but I think there's a lot of that sort of behavior in these prices. And to me, that does not create, these are not stable price points that everyone is sort of feels comfortable and agreed upon. There's a lot of negativity towards Evolutions. There's a lot of positivity. There's a lot of forces that I think are going to move the price. What do you think?
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that we have to weigh the perspectives from both angles, the positives, the negatives, the pros, the cons. A factor that I would also keep in mind, and that you had briefly spoken about, is the rate at which sealed products are being opened. Now, there may be massive hordes of Evolutions sitting in somebody's home, you know, or thousands of people's homes. My my contention with that is how long can you really do that, especially if that is their approach, where it's, if they've got a horde of evolutions and then Shining Fates comes out, they get a horde of Shining Fates, and then Battle Styles comes out, they get a massive quantity. Like at some point, you're just sitting on so much inventory, and maybe you release that a little bit, throughout the years. But I actually had this conversation with David Person as well about the because I've seen it myself. I've seen in sealed collector pages. I've seen the big stores of modern products. Now I haven't seen evolutions in particular, but especially products released throughout the Sword and Shield era. Really, those released over the course of 2020, I have seen those. And I asked him, I said, do you think there is, because he was bullish on modern. And I said, okay, are you worried about the reprints? Are you worried about the massive hordes? And he said, you can only hold on to that inventory for so long. And you can only do that for so long. If you're purchasing every new set, $10,000 worth of booster boxes or sealed products, at some point, something's got to give. I mean, maybe there is, but to my knowledge, it seems unlikely that there would be that many people out there that are able to, or that would want to hoard that much product time and time again. So, and then along with that, the rate at which this product is being opened up. I mean, you can probably attest to this. And I'm going to be guilty of this as well, of doing box breaks on my channel. But especially with sets released over the last 5, 6, 7 years, that stuff is being opened up like no other. And a lot of it is being done in box breaks, because this is the dissonance in my head. They're able to ask such a premium on these packs. I've seen box breaks for Champions Path going, packs going for $20, $25 a pack, and it makes no sense to me. But I think it boils down in a lot of ways to this conspicuous consumption. There's just so much money being pumped in, through stimulus and other means, that people just, and people are bored. People aren't going out. They're not spending that money on vacations and all the things that they have in the past. And they're also wanting that social connection. And so you see people just saying, you know what, I'm okay with taking the hit and spending the premium on these packs, so that one, I can feel a part of a community. One, I can, get my hands on products. And I that's kind of the thing that I look at as well, is as we see more people come in, more people are also going to want to profit off of that. And typically that means opening more product. So, that's the other thing that I keep in mind when I think of something like evolutions, and I see it outside that reprint window, in my opinion. And I see people, again, I look at it from their perspective as well, in saying, wow, this booster box is now at $1,000. I'm going to do a box break, and I'm going to charge, 30, 40% over what the current market value of an individual pack would go for. And people are, again, trying to capitalize on that. Now, will that eat up much of that stock that people might have? I don't know. But again, it's weighing those pros and those cons.
So just because I really track the amount of boxes that are being sold on eBay as much as I possibly can, particularly from these big sellers, and I try and I talk to people who had 1,000 here and there, and how quickly they sold. Most just couldn't possibly be opened at this point in time. But I think your logic is completely sound there. And it's why I think that the booster box, if you want to invest in evolutions, the booster box is 100% the way to go, more than any other set, actually, because
I totally agree.
Still being opened, and the fact that the cards inside, like, I expect it's possible that the booster box will keep going up, and we've already seen the card values go down quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Now other cards have gone up in that set, so there's been sort of an interesting thing. But like the Charizard, saw a PSA 9 sell for, I think it was like 1,200 or something, and then it went down to 300, and mm-hmm. At the same time, Evolutions managed to stay firm and, you know, has doubled again in price, where I don't believe the cards have yet doubled in price. I haven't looked at it too much this week. It's been so fast, but it's when a box moves very differently than the expected value of the box, it's a very interesting phenomenon. And that's where you have to think about what's going on here. Well, is it because the box is so fun to open that people are paying such a premium for the opening or for the experience? Definitely could be the case right now in Evolutions, for sure. One. Two, I think that there's people aren't doing research and are just kind of trying to have fun and enjoy themselves, and probably are being told by the streamer, unfortunately, a lot of times that that's what they should buy. That's the best set to buy right now. They're going to go up a lot, like that type of advice. You know, what that is going to do in the long run in terms of eating up the product is exactly the right question. I completely agree with you. And I think that if you hold those booster boxes because of the price spikes, and because people are still have this fervor around it and want to open it and that sort of thing, it's going to eat that supply quickly. If this can maintain itself for another year or two, I would imagine enough of the supply would get eaten that I would feel more comfortable with that booster box. The issue is what happens when prices start to tumble and everyone panics, who thought that these were like invincible assets that would go up. And if that happens, you could see quick retraces and, interestingly, less boxes being opened up, which is the exact opposite of what should happen and is the type of bubble thing, right? Prices, but you shouldn't open up boxes when they get more expensive, but really people do, because then they value the cards. There's this weird sort of psychology that happens there. And for me, it's like, I think part of what's good for me, going to your point before of like, and I never thought that you were like buying a lot of this and shilling it up or hyping it up. I don't. I if anyone thinks that of you, you know, we're making really huge leaps here. On what I think I think you're trying to do here, which is just like talk about your opinions and grow your channel and like talk about Pokemon. But you know, for me, it's like I own everything, so it kind of gives me a little bit of a freedom of like, you know, people don't necessarily know that. They think I just own vintage or whatever. Really, I own a ton of modern, in part because it was much easier to buy a lot of modern and was cheaper, and I enjoyed it. But for me, I don't have a stake in if vintage goes up more or if modern goes up. These are just my analysis based on the numbers. And so and I'm sure we have other topics you might want to touch on here other than just evolution. So I know we really got into that, but
well, no, this is good, because really, we really are moving into this next, well, we already have, but talking about this other big aspect that I think so many people overlook is just the psychology. And really, that's what we've been delving into in discussing evolutions, is the psychology of the overall market, or a lot of cards that seem just strange, and that they are like your example with the what was it, Fates Collide Mew, or Furious?
I think it was Fates Collide. I think from that
Fates
set.
Collide. You know, same thing here. So we're getting into this psychology, you know, and using the exact opposite example from Evolutions, where we see the booster box going up, the value of the cards either stagnating or going down. Not too long ago, we were seeing the opposite with like first edition Team Rocket, where the value of the graded cards, PSA 9, PSA 10s, were just going up and up, but the value of the booster box was staying exactly the same. And those are all of like the little discrepancies that we look at there, and we go and we try to study that, you know, and especially, you know, you and Rafi, you guys are good at that. You guys are good at like having those difficult conversations that people don't really want to hear, but they're so important, because that gives people a more holistic view. So kind of going on this, you know, this conversation of psychology, will a lot of the psychological factors that we're seeing right now, do you see those changing in a post-COVID world?
Yeah, that's the other point, right? To talk about there is, you know, if a lot of that stuff is what's, you know, pushing up the value of something like Evolutions, you know, or these, you know, people are on these going on these break channels because they can't do their other hobbies. They can't go outside. They really want that community, that connection. The simplest logical thing to say would be like that would have some to a big effect, probably, you know, in a rational world on the market. You know, I think that when we look at just like online shopping and online sales across the board, even in non-collectible things, it's huge. When we look at like video game spending, where people aren't investing in video games to make money, but they're spending lots and lots of money on all of these things, it's for the fun and enjoyment. And so there's a lot of fun and enjoyment people are having now, which they probably won't be looking for as much after COVID, just speaking logically. And I think that as an investor, it's something that you should, particularly for leveraging yourself. And it goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier. Like, I know people who, one guy came to me and he's like, I'm $30,000, just on credit right now, like leveraged, like, should I sell everything? What should I do? Just like panicking, just didn't think through. Another guy who like spent his like a big part of his college fund, on this, and then made money initially and then lost most of it. He managed to break out basically even, but was buying sort of like around the Logan Paul and, and it's like, the reality is that happens. Like now, when we looked at crypto, same thing happened in that bubble. People feel somehow, and I guess it's so strange to me, PokéNav, because I guess I'm just sort of the opposite person. When I see prices go up a lot, I worry, and it makes me want to sell an item. And I think that when you're like that, you have to be careful of not being too bearish, of course, because you're more kind of naturally sort of a conservative sort of bear type. But I will also say, I was buying every single Pokemon card I possibly could for 2 years in a row when everyone in my life was saying that I was insane and crazy. And I was saying to people, I think these cards will be worth $1 million. I feel very confident in that based on what I saw in comic books. I think this franchise might even be equally, if not even more connected to kids than comic books were in those 80s eras. And I think the amount of supply, particularly of some of these cards, is comparable to certain Golden Age comics enough that there's going to be a certain amount of growth. I just never would have expected it to be sort of this quickly type of thing. But I bring all of that up because I think that when what was your question again? I'm sorry, I might have lost it.
Just kind of how the psychology may change from what we're experiencing right now in the post-COVID.
So I think that I do think that and I think this about things like Tesla stock, and other sorts of things, and GameStop. People are buying these things because it's also fun and it's entertainment, and they like watching it. And that is artificially inflating the prices if that fun goes away, because it's not boring anymore. People are investing in Tesla in part because they like Elon Musk and he's fun. Right? Like people are investing in Pokemon because it's enjoyable, because it's fun, because those openings are fun. It's not like the Warren Buffett, I'm going to pour over the numbers and this sucks and it's not fun. And we're buying companies that we like based on like the profits that they make, and not based on like how much fun it is to own that company or how much we like the people there, whatever it is, And so I think that it's fun, like ARK Invest, this ARK Invest, I'm sure you're aware of like the crazy returns that they've had. Investing, I think it's fun to invest in that because it's so fun to think I could be rich or I could make a ton of money. It's so fun and enjoyable to believe that this item that I have is going to 10x again. And people have to understand that needs to go into their assessment, that a certain amount of the market is falling prey to that sort of what I would call irrational exuberance, which is the hallmark of any bubble. And you have to kind of measure how much irrational exuberance is there. How much do people know that Charizard, I could buy them all day at $3 in PSA 10 condition that's now selling for $1,000? What does that make you think and feel about that card? Does that make you think, oh, awesome, now it's going to go, that means it's going to go, because it could, but it's such risk. And it gets very removed from what do you value the item at? You know, I think what I'm trying to wrap my head around that's so difficult, and this is where I don't really have answers for it, is how does the psychology of these collectibles differ from the psychology around stocks? How much does it differ? And it's a bit scary to invest in collectibles, like compared to stocks for me, because stocks I'm investing in profits. You know, I have these ideas of how much the company's making. I have a sense of the business model. Pokemon is like, how much do we all like these things and believe in their potential future value? And what scares me is I think people believe way too much. When you have all the experts in a field saying that it's going to quadruple in value again, scary. Any field.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
that should scare people, that you don't have even voices. And I think that it becomes, you know, at the end of the day, the way you invest, like, this is fun. Like, I like these products. I think that they have things that are going for them. I think that they probably will go up over time. I can hold them, even if they go down in the short run. I'm planning on holding these things, enjoying them for a long time. I have this 5, 10, 20 year time horizon on this item. And I see it as investable that long is a completely fine way, I think, to do this, just personally speaking. But this like huge leveraging stuff is what scares me. And I think that it creates that, it just like we had this sort of like black swan craziness that I think caused this market to go up 10 times. I think we could have the same type of weird black swan thing where we leave our houses for COVID, PSA finally catches up, and all the modern supply hits the market, maybe in huge batches. Like the reason the market got built so much is because PSA closed, because everyone was at home, because people got stimulus checks, because people were not spending money on other things, because people were bored, depressed, anxious, needed community, because people were getting unemployment checks, were making more on unemployment than they ever made before.
Exactly.
And like, that's all crazy stuff that isn't going to be sustainable. The market is going to have to correct for that stuff. Now, the question is, will the demand be so changed, or will the demand keep growing, or the awareness of Pokemon kind of blast through that? And that's where the bulls, I think, have a good argument of like, there's still so many more Pokemon fans out there that it's going to not matter. Yes, there's going to be some correction for that stuff, but there's so much new interest and hype. I have no idea. And I don't think anyone has any clue, to be completely honest. But if you're not factoring in all those things and you don't take them seriously, that's where I worry for you. And particularly if you're leveraging yourself, you know, on credit, you need to take it as seriously as me. You're competing against guys like me. You're competing against big guys who have lots of money, who doing buyouts. There could be companies right now, PokéNav, doing buyouts on evolutions right now. Large companies who understood how much was left, realized they could push it to 1,000, realized they could make $400 on the product, and now are going to sell and slowly sell it out. But they're going to do it really slowly so as not to cause a panic. I mean, there's so much money to be made right now. It's so unregulated, and there's so much interest that we'll have to see. What do you think about those concepts, or those stuff that you think about?
I think the most important thing that people have to realize is that, one, in any type of investment decision, diversification is always a good thing. So, you know, maybe you have your long-term investments. You think, okay, I'm just going to sit on these products for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and I'm just going to see where they go. I don't feel obligated at any point that I need to sell those off because I haven't put myself in a financial position that I have to. And then beyond that, you have more of your short-term investments that you think over the course of maybe 1 to 5 years, you think you can flip for, and this is strictly speaking from the investment standpoint. This has nothing to do with collectors, because it's a whole different breed. I mean, you're garnering a product for your collection because you just truly enjoy it. It doesn't have to have any financial value. It has inherent value to you. So from the investing perspective, you know, having those products that you think over 1 to 5 years that you could garner a reasonable return from. And that's the thing that I think so many people overlook is that, Rafi was talking about it before, over the last 150 years, 9 to 10% S&P 500. You look over the last 20 years, it's about 6%. Like that to me is a reasonable return. So if you're looking at something, you say, you know what, in a year or two, I think I could maybe garner 10% return, or even 10% year over year return. That to me, I mean, that's a viable investment decision. It's the people that are going, I'm going to buy this $25,000 booster box and I'm going to take out a loan for it. I'm going to put it on credit and I'm going to hope that it, doubles in the next year or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are the pitfalls. And, talking about the psychology and how it relates to the financial markets, I've compared the financial markets. There are a lot of analogies to stocks, bonds, and collectibles, not necessarily from, from having an actual regulated industry, but just the psychology of investors. And you've seen this with various bubbles in the past. You saw this with the dot-com bubble. There's always going to be pitfalls there, and you just have to broaden your scope. But I think, as I said, at the core of it, diversification, I think, is key. Understand how much you can leverage to where you don't put yourself in the hole. And also understand that, I'll give an example here. So when I first started investing in Pokemon, this was back in around 2016. Great time to get into doing this. One of the reasons why I don't have like a large stock of investments, an enormous collection, is because I diversified many of the profits that I garnered from Pokemon into other asset classes. So I diversified that into other, stocks, bonds, the other financial assets, into real estate. And now, much in the same manner as yourself, I'm in a position where I never feel pressured that whatever I am doing, that I'm taking on too much, or that I feel pressured to sell. And I think if I do anything on my channel for you guys, I think you are very, very good at looking at these underlying factors, as I said, that point towards the market and the overall macroeconomy of Pokemon and other extraneous factors outside of that. For me, it's really providing more of that financial perspective, and really, taking something that more people are probably familiar with with the financial world and with investing in that aspect, and relating that to Pokemon so that they can kind of rein in their expectation and really invest for long-term sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with that, it's impossible to time corrections. It's impossible to time when short-term movements kind of up and down, in my opinion. And when I say impossible, when a big hype person comes in or does something quickly out of this, if you can race, there are tons of people right now who are doing like momentum investing around social media, where they're using, whatever they are to kind of be the first to hear about the next, stock that's being the stock that's being talked most about on social media, or the company that I watch these dumb money guys who I think are kind of interesting in terms of the way they invest. They're literally the exact opposite of me. They don't look at value at all. They don't look at the actual company at all. They just look at interest and demand.
Basically, they're basically performing a sentiment analysis on the broader, in this case, using kind of the sphere of social media, or just kind of media in general, and coming to their conclusion based upon that analysis.
And it's I believe them when they claim that they've made, I don't have any evidence, but they, there are lots of people who claim they've made lots of money who haven't made money, but I personally believe them that they've made $40 million or whatever, that they've said that they've done through social media and momentum investing. You have these huge, people who were momentum investing, and momentum stocks have way outpaced value, financial type stocks over the last 10 years, really, but in particular over the last couple of years. And so I don't put that down as not a good way to invest. In fact, that's a very logical, rational way to invest in the short term, but there's huge risk in investing that way, in my opinion. And there's also, you need to be able to somehow be ahead of basically the herd. Mm-hmm. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to move just slightly ahead of the herd. But by the time you're hearing a YouTuber tell his 40,000 view audience about a card, you aren't ahead. Mm-hmm. Like, people have already known about it. They've already placed their orders. There are people far ahead of you who have the distributor connections to get that card at retail. Like, there are people who are, now you might be ahead of the next group of people, so there are ways to stay ahead of some part of it and still make certain returns and money. Mm-hmm. But, so that type of investing can definitely work, but I'm definitely with you. And the way that I invest in my personality is conservative, invest in things that you understand, where you see the value in it, where you believe others over time will see the value in it, where you don't have to worry about what is the right time to sell, because there is never, unless the fundamental valuation of the thing radically changes, there isn't, like, the best time to sell is in 10 years, right? The best time to mm-hmm. sell is holding it.
Exactly.
And I'm going to hold my Pokemon items, the ones particularly that I love from my collection, until I feel like the market's radically changed. The interest is going to, I see some big shift. And that's how I invest in stocks. That's how I invest in everything in my life. And it's, my dad's a financial advisor, and that's how I, mm-hmm. I was brought up investing. I think, trying to do hybrid models is interesting. Trying to do some of both. I think taking shots on certain things, but I think that when there are certain items in the hobby that I think can have both elements going for them, that they both have good fundamentals and a lot of the social media presence that you can try to get ahead of in modern, that can be good to go for. But yeah, at the end of the day, you have to, I think, have a plan. Like, if you really want to be a serious investor of anything, it's trying to figure out, what type of investor am I? How much am I going to allocate, as you were saying, to these different investment categories? What type of investor am I going to be within each of these categories? Or you are going to probably do worse than average if you just mm-hmm. picked random. You should just throw your money in index funds, because studies show that we're very bad. We tend to buy things when they go up and sell things when they go down. Mm-hmm. Exact opposite.
Buy high, sell low.
Yeah. Do. You should be, and it's human nature. And so that is just very true. And so you have to understand that about your own psychology and figure out how you are going to either have that self-control to sort of get around that. And one way is just buy things that you think have good value and hold them forever, mm-hmm. is a great strategy for that. Another thing is setting price points where you're actually going to sell an item. I have people coming to me all the time saying, is now the right time to sell evolutions? Is now the right time to sell evolutions? Is now the right time?
It's kind of like placing a stop or a sell limit on your product.
Yeah. It's like, well, do you believe in this item? There were people who bought it and then sold for lower because they were like, I only bought it to make money. I didn't actually believe in the item. If you, mm-hmm. I know you made a video saying that you still think evolutions is underpriced, or that you think it's going to be one of the growers for next year. I do want to press you on that, because I think if we compare that to vintage, I just want to hear your sort of analysis of why do you think $1,000 and that would be better than certain things. And it might absolutely be, but yeah, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought, but, I worked a full day today, and I'm
well, and for those of you out there that don't know, Jake is very well qualified to speak on the psychology of the market, because you're a therapist by trade, correct?
Yeah, I'm a licensed therapist.
So, I mean, he's studied this stuff, maybe not necessarily in the capacity of this. Maybe you guys did while you were in school, but
I
he
was very
sees this
interested in
kind of.
economics and did it and took a bunch of game theory courses and have always been fascinated
Mhm.
with with these types of topics. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and like I said, you guys do a fantastic job of bringing these things to light. And again, they're not always the easiest conversation, but it's a conversation that we need to have. But yeah, going to your question about evolutions, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say, when I created that video, you know how it is in the YouTube sphere.
Yeah.
Top videos, they always do well. But I want to put this out there, and I want to let people know that um, from if you're looking at the echelon, I think that Evolutions is still a good buy, even at that $1,000 price point. Um, because again, we're looking at a reasonable return. I personally think that if you bought Evolutions at $1,000, do I think that you could probably perform as well, or maybe keep pace with the same rate of return that, let's say, the S&P 500 would have? Yes, I do. And so a lot of the time, and then I follow up with that with first edition Neo Hollows. But it's at a price point that I think is still attainable by the average investor. And I try to appeal to that as much as I can on my channel as well, is trying to find ways, we talk about value investing, finding those areas that are overlooked, that are undervalued. And that's not to say that Evolutions is quote unquote undervalued at this point, but I think it still has enough of an opportunity that when I look at it from a reasonable return perspective, and also at the price point that it's currently at, I think that it's still a good buy for the majority of people.
So do you think it's a better buy than, to put you on the spot here, do you think it's a better buy than buying like PSA 10 first edition hollows from WotC or E series?
If
You can buy
you,
three of them probably, depending on the cards from like E series or something.
mhm. I would say it depends on perhaps the time horizon. If we're looking over the course of 2021, I look at this year, and again, talking about that momentum type of investing. If I look at 2021 and I say this is also an anniversary, the 25th anniversary for Pokemon, and people maybe coming into the hobby or looking back on some of these previous milestone sets, that's why I would be more of an advocate, I would say, for Evolutions, just based upon that precedent where, yes, over the long term, 5-10 years, are those first edition hollows, are they going to outperform Evolutions? In my opinion, more than likely, more than likely. But really looking over the course of this year, I would say that, based upon that, I would maybe be a little more bullish towards Evolutions. But it could be very well the opposite. It could be where, again, the community is becoming more educated. There's more voices out there, that people start to realize this, you know what, just from a quantity perspective, I can pick up 3 of these for the price of an Evolutions booster box. And
You'll
you
own
could see
like
just, yeah,
10% of the population of a card in the world for the price of one booster box where there are
yeah,
probably a million of. I mean, those numbers are kind of staggering from a rarity perspective. Now, what I will say is they're such different entities, right? So comparing one in terms of what you like in terms of being a sealed collector versus
mm-hmm,
I I really like your analysis there on the Evolutions booster box. I think you're right. The way that I think about it though is that I think that box could go to 10,000. I think that box could go 10,000. I think that box could go to 2,000. I think that box could go to in the next year. I think that box could go back to 150 in the next year, to 200 in the next year.
mm-hmm,
Depending on how many are being opened and depending on people's belief and faith in it, because it needs so much demand for it to keep doing that, whereas you need barely any demand for these vintage cards, to a $300 card could be worth $10,000 card. It could be worth 10,000 if you have 30 people with enough money who want that card eventually, and of course the way that part of the struggle and the secret of why rare cards may not do very well is because they're not able to sell publicly and ladder up as much, and that doesn't give people the confidence that it's actually worth that amount. Because people like to check eBay sold listings, see that it was sold for that amount, and then no one wants to pay the new highest price. People want to get into it or pay the former price, and so all of that is involved in that. But in the long run, that stuff is probably not going to matter. That it's going to matter, but not nearly as much. That's more, I think, shorter term, and I mean even 5 years, type of stuff that creates these very odd differences between collectibles and the way collectible markets and prices get established versus stocks that are that are traded and so liquid, and behave so differently because of that in the short term. But I actually think in the long term, the value assessments are going to be where it's at there. I do agree with you though that like any card that moves up a ton in value could move up a ton again in this type of environment, and that those are the cards that I think and sets that I think, if you're looking for those short-term returns, would be interesting there. I do think it's interesting that you also think that it's going to go up over time. That's where I don't know where you're getting that evaluation from. I just have no evaluation. I'm so lost. I am so lost on evolutions. And I just feel like we have no idea about that because there's so many in that box, and we just have so little idea how many are going to be opened and how that's going to age. And for me, the best I can do is compare it to other collectibles. There's nothing really that close because that is so close to that. But when I look at like reprints from other collectibles, for example, you see like a $2 million Batman 1 sell, okay? For in CGC 9.4 for 2.2 million, the reprint comic of that from 1984, which is over 40 years, in 9.4 sells for $100. So 2.2 million to $100. That's what I expect to happen in Pokemon if Pokemon gets established. I expect all these other cards to be worth tens of thousands if Pokemon becomes established, and I expect all these modern cards to not move at all or go down from what they are right now. If it follows the trend, that's not my trend. That's the trend of these other markets. And so now if Pokemon could be different, and because of the generational effect could be different to some extent. But the reason why it's so similar to comic books is it's the same characters across. And the reason why that original Batman is so expensive is people wanted that for that Batman 1. It's not the first appearance of Batman, but the first appearance of Batman, is before, and that comic's worth even a lot more than that. And 9.4, I don't even know how much it would be worth. But the other thing is that these things do not move like normal items. Like even those items, they like go up, because they're so rare. It's like you have one auction, just like this Lugia auction, where the Lugia out of nowhere, first edition PSA 10 Neo went for 129,000. Presumably because two people were willing to want it way more than anyone else ever did. That card was going for $3,000, right? 3,000, 4,000 or 4,000, maybe 5,000, depending on your time frame, went to 129,000. That's an insane return, right?
Was this just recently on eBay? Is this where you're seeing, or is this in an auction house?
The PWCC auction through eBay, but through PWCC auction. Whereas one just sold now for 79,000. So it went down. I
was gonna say that's the one that I must have missed, the one at you said 120, but I saw
2 months ago. And that's part of why this card has made big news, is because that big drop. But people will say, oh my God, that card is having a big retrace. Like that's not what happened there. Yeah. Like that's a misunderstanding of the market. What happened probably is there were two people who really wanted it for a huge evaluation. It was also at the top. And now this time, the two people who wanted it the most, or three or whatever, were only willing to pay that much. And so for those types of items, particularly in the long run, like you could see those tremendous, values, particularly when these items only sell once a year or once every 3 years. Because the big thing that people miss right now in vintage is that it seems like it's not that much scarcer than modern because it's still selling so much because people are selling it, but it's so much rarer than modern. And so if that gets gobbled up for real and we stop seeing constant auctions where you can buy it, you're going to see prices soar on those types of items. I promise you. The exact same thing we saw in these other collectible categories. Whereas that, I don't see that ever happening with modern. And I do think that if you see that soar, will it bring more interest into modern? I believe, PokéNav, that a lot of people are investing into modern because they think it's going to be the next vintage. You know, they think that it's going to move the same way, and it just doesn't have any of the same fundamentals. None of it, except that it has the same Pokemon on it. It's much more akin to 80s, 90s comics and sports cards through the junk wax era, where basically they were printing it so much, everyone thought it was going to be extremely, rich. And those comics and things are worth less now today. And booster boxes and cards are worth less now today, 40 years later, 30 years later, 20 years later, in some cases. Now, the top 1% of those things have gone up a lot in value. And so if what holds true for those markets holds true for Pokemon, that's what I would expect to see. But my response, and I said this in the beginning, there just isn't enough data. Just because those hobbies move that way, I don't feel confident that Pokemon is going to move that way. There's a ton of risk. But understanding why those moved that way, how that might be applicable to this, I think is really important. And then it's all about, as we've talked a lot about, mitigating risk, whether it's not overspending, budgeting, or diversifying. If you want to try certain things in the market, try a little vintage here, try a little modern, and kind of see how it does over time.
For sure. No, I think that's a perfect way to leave off here, because I think at the core of it, that's really what I think both Jake and I, and I'm sure Rafi would agree on, guys, is that if you're going to go about this, do so in a financially sound manner, diversify yourself, and above all else, try to garner as much information and as much knowledge as you possibly can, and get it from as many diverse resources, and then bring that together, bring all of that together, bring that financial soundness, bring the information that you get from Jake and from Rafi, from all of these other great content creators out there, bring that together, because in the end, knowledge is going to be power. And if you've got the financial foundation taken care of, in the long term, you're probably going to end up better off. But Jake, hey man, I really, really appreciate you being here today, as well as Rafi. This was an awesome conversation. We didn't even get into like a third. But honestly, this was exactly what I wanted to discuss here today. Because as I said, I think these are two components, or two aspects that many people overlook: the history of cards and sets, and the psychology of the market. I know you have spoken about them on your channel, as well as Rafi, but a lot of the time, as I said, people just kind of overlook them or breeze by them, because it's not as exciting as just throwing out buy these cards or buy this set. But guys, this is really, really important information. And Jake, if there's anyone listening out there that they may not be familiar with you guys or where to find you, what are your different socials so that they can go and check you guys out?
So we have an Instagram account that we check for messages. We don't post there too often in terms of new pictures, but you can see a little bit of my collection there. And it's just Pokenomics with an underscore at the end. And yeah, in our YouTube channel, Pokenomics with Jake and Rafi. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. If any of your viewers manage to make it through the whole thing, you must really love Pokemon and are interested in the same sort of stuff as us. And I'd love to continue the discussion and certainly have you on our channel. And my favorite thing to do is to do lives. I know you do some of them too, so maybe we can have you on for that if you're interested. And I really I respect you. I respect what you're doing here. I really appreciate that you sort of allowed me to and I'd love to go more in depth, and maybe on my channel we can, but to push back and I think that's important. I think people debating ideas and sharing different ideas in a respectful way is actually how people can make better sense of these things for themselves.
Definitely.
And I think that's something that you can help bring to this space, and hopefully I can help bring to this space, and other content creators, where we can actually say our true feelings, even if they disagree, with each other, while not condemning people's motives or condemning that someone doesn't care about their audience or care about the Pokemon community, or I think everyone is doing this to try and help people and share what we think is true, to the best of our ability, and will be useful. So thank you very much for having me on.
Of course, man. And you just gave me an idea. I can already see a Pokemon roundtable where we get someone that has differing perspectives, maybe from the two of us, and just have a little roundtable. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, Rafi and I have talked about doing debates with him moderating, where we bring people on and we would like debate a specific topic, and I think that too would be great. But the roundtable would be awesome. So
excellent. Well, again, Jake, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, be sure you go and check out Jake and Rafi on their Pokenomics channel. Awesome content. And other than that, guys, we will see you all next time right here on the Pokemon Masterclass. Take care, everybody.